One of my Berkeley profs, one of my favorite things that has stayed with me from my time there, he said, Nick, a bad day playing music is still better than a good day doing just about anything else.
Welcome to Audio Branding, the hidden gem of marketing. Sound plays a more important role in human behavior and our decision-making than you may realize. In this podcast, I'll help you understand the art and science of sound so you can better influence others in business and your life. I'm your host, Jody Krangle. Let's delve a little deeper. This is the first part of my interview with Nick Morrison. My next guest is an Amazon #1 best-selling author, professional musician, composer, teacher, voice actor, YouTube creator, actor, and music media consultant from Calgary, Alberta. He has toured through the United States, Canada, and Japan as a guitarist, worked as a session musician and writer-composer for Warner Brothers, Universal Studios, Sony, MTV, ABC, NBC, HGTV, and HBO, among others. He was educated at the Berklee College of Music in Boston, Massachusetts, where he studied guitar performance and music business management. In 2021, he began writing guitar instructional books and will continue to bring his love of the instrument to as many people around the world as possible. His name is Nick Morrison, and our discussion runs the gamut from music to sound design to audio branding and everything in between. Stay tuned for a wild ride. As always, if you have questions for my guest, you're welcome to reach out through the links in the show notes. And if you have questions for me, visit audiobrandingpodcast.com, where you'll find a lot of ways to get in touch. Plus, subscribing to the newsletter will let you know when the new podcasts are available. And now, here's my interview with Nick Morrison. Hey, Nick. Thanks so much for joining me today. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I'm super happy to be here.
So I usually start off all of my interviews with the same question. And the reason I do this is because I love the stories that it brings out from people.
Okay.
So I want to ask, do you have an early memory of how sound moved you?
Yeah.
See, that's a story waiting to happen.
Well, so when I remember there's two stories, one that I'll truncate and another that I'll really kind of give you when I knew that I was going to be a sound professional of some description. I didn't really know the term at the time, but that's what I knew I was going to do.
Sure.
My mom and my family is a very musical family. And my mom would, before the craze of the whole Mozart for minors or Mozart for babies or whatever that whole thing was, she would sit and put speakers as close as she could to her belly to play music for me and sing with me. So I've had musical experiences in utero. And I'm not going to be so weird as to say I remember floating in the womb and listening to music, but it's always been a huge part of my life. Yeah. But it's always been a huge part of my life. And as long as I could remember singing and dancing with my mom, no matter what was going on, good, bad, indifferent, feelings of joy, and of course now at 42, I'm going back. It's very nostalgic. And of course you only see with rose-colored glasses, but everything it's only good memories. It's warm memories. It's fond memories. It's happy stuff. And that is kind of my earliest exposure. And actually her favorite from that time and one of my favorites still even today is a Canadian artist. He's a folk artist named Valdy, who is from Ottawa. Now he lives out in Vancouver Island, but specifically the Valdy and the Hometown Band record. And it's really cool since moving to Canada, and I lived in Vancouver for a little while as well. I've actually met and worked with a lot of those people that were on that record, which is really cool. Not in any huge capacity, like I've produced a record with them or whatever, but jam nights and
sure.
Different projects and things like that. And it's been cool to be able to meet some of my heroes that I didn't even really know were my heroes.
Sure.
But I bring that up because those early experiences and the way that he sings on those records and the way that those records were put together and the style of music, it is still influencing me now 41, 42 years later with my own writing, my own style, my own sense of melody, which I think is really cool. Sorry, that was the truncated version, quote unquote. Maybe the other story is shorter. So I remember when I got my first Nintendo.
Oh, yes.
In
okay.
1986, 85. I don't remember when they came out, but in the 80s. And of course, at that time, it came with the master controller. You'd have one controller and you had the Duck Hunt gun. And then you had one game cartridge, which was Mario Brothers and Duck Hunt. So you could choose which one you wanted.
Sure.
And I became obsessed with Mario Brothers and the music in each level. And I was fascinated with how different the music would be level to level, and how when you would run out of time, suddenly the music would play faster. And just the different, and I didn't even, at that time, I wasn't good at video games and I couldn't really play it. But my entire goal of playing the game was to hear all the different music.
Yeah.
Throughout the game. And it was at that point that I really decided, I was like, I'm going to do something with music. Maybe I'm going to write music for video games or something, or I don't know, movies. I didn't have the vocabulary then to know specifically what I wanted to do, but I knew that I wanted to get into sound. And it's funny because I remember, I think my aunt had like a little Casio keyboard, maybe like a 42 keyboard, like, the ones that like took 87 D-cell batteries. Yeah. So it was really heavy. Mm-hmm. But she gave it to me, and it had like this pre-programmed like drum loops and sort of grooves. Like there was a mamba and a samba and a bossa nova. Those. And it had the auto chord feature so that you could play one key and it would play arpeggiated chords or one-shot chords. And I remember sitting with this thing and planning out my own version of Mario Brothers. And I had a journal with like little boxes of what the levels looked like. And then I would write down all of the information on how I would play on the keyboard to make the music happen for those levels.
Sure. It's the original dynamic music. I mean,
yeah, totally.
That's a portion of audio branding right there.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I can definitely see where the whole musical thing is coming from.
Yeah.
So what got you interested in the guitar? Because I know that you started playing that.
Yeah, I mean, I had started playing violin when I was very young. I think I was about 3 or 4. So I started with the Suzuki method, and I loved music, and I loved the violin. I loved the way it sounded, but I hated practicing.
Oh, I get you there.
And it was a fight. I remember with my mom yelling at me, "Go pick up your violin, go practice, go." And I played from the time I was, 3 or 4 until I was about 8, mm-hmm. when it became so much of a fight that my mom just kind of was like, "Listen, you either want to do this or you don't, and you're old enough now to choose." And I said, "Yeah, I don't want to do it anymore." And then at 9 or 10, I took up piano for a little while, but it was the same kind of thing. I hated practicing. And my teacher at the time, I remember, basically I went in and I was like, "Hey, check out these cool things." And I was writing my own music at this point.
Sure.
And she basically yelled at me saying, "You can't do that. You're not learning your lessons. You're wasting your parents and my time and money." And I said, "Okay." So I got up, I closed my books, and I walked out of the room, and that was the end of my piano lessons.
Oh my goodness. Well, that's not a way to encourage you.
No, totally not. So I didn't really play anything for a couple of years until I was about 12, and I heard Metallica Enter Sandman on the radio.
Oh, yeah.
And I thought, wow, that's really cool. I want to learn to do that. My mom had an old acoustic sitting in a closet, and I asked her if I could play it, and it was horribly out of tune and just whatever. So I remember borrowing a Hal Leonard or maybe a Mel Bay basic guitar level 1 book and trying to work through it and learn how to like tune a guitar and just do whatever. And it just, from those first notes, and I subsequently didn't learn to play Enter Sandman until probably 2 or 3 years later. But, I was able to pluck stuff out, and it just, I fell in love with it at 12, and it's been a lifelong obsession ever since.
That's great. Yeah. I could see how the effort would make it something that you would be proud of being able to do. Yeah,
there's a it's not a steep learning curve. And I know I'm going off on a bit of a tangent about the guitar, but there's not really a steep learning curve to how the guitar works in terms of as an instrument. It's actually pretty simple. It's like string, put your finger here, makes a higher note, move your finger higher, makes a higher note. Like, great.
Yeah.
But there's a major learning curve to the physicality of it. Developing calluses on your fingers, learning how much pressure to apply, being able to move deftly between chords, and then soloing and individual melody work and these sorts of things. It takes a long time to develop that facility. Whereas, and I'm going to take a shot at piano players here, but I mean, a cat can jump on a piano and it sounds good.
This is true.
Right?
Yeah,
like a C chord will always sound, as long as your piano
coming
is
from
tuned,
a piano player. Well,
right?
Once a piano player.
And I love the piano now. And of course, I've sort of self-taught myself. And then through school, I had to learn for like ear training and arrangement class and stuff like that. I would never play in front of people, but I know it well enough that I can plunk stuff out.
I'm the same way.
And I love the piano. It's my grandmother was a concert pianist for a time. And I remember sitting, listening to her play and practice underneath. I would sit like kind of by the soundboard right by her feet. And so, I mean, I love the piano. But again, like a C chord is always a C chord. There's no sharp or flat. There's no bending it out of tune. Whereas with guitar, that can happen really easy. And especially with beginners, they tend to really try and squeeze the crap out of their necks. And it's like, you don't need to do that.
I know we're all dealing with a lot these days, so I really wanted to acknowledge those that have gone out of their way to leave an honest review of this podcast. Like Edith, who writes, "Excellent job. I will recommend this podcast to my friend who is now working on their company branding. I believe that sound plays a great role in their company's brand, and I'm sure she will like this recommendation. Excellent job, Jody." Thanks so much, Edith. I'm so glad you and your friend find the podcast useful. I really appreciate your comments. And for those of you that are interested, you can also leave a voice review now off of the main podcast page. It's super simple, and I'd love to hear what you think. Now, back to the show. So when you're teaching people, because I know you have a course on teaching guitar.
Yes,
so
several.
Several, exactly. So when you teach people, you've said that you want it to be less stressful and more fun.
Yeah.
So can you explain what your point is there?
Totally. So I've been doing this a long time. I've been teaching since I was 16 because I developed that facility fairly quickly, and then I got good enough at it that I could teach my friends. Now, I mean, at 16, can you really say, yeah, I was a professional teacher? No, not really. But I start, you start cutting your teeth and learning how to work with people and how to get ideas across and really start to develop that one-to-one kind of personality or specialty, if you will. And I've spent a lot of years teaching sort of beginners, intermediates, and then sort of advanced. And then, of course, as you go through school and, so on and so forth, you end up getting teaching like college prep stuff and whatever else. What I've found now at this particular point in my life is that I'm not so much interested in teaching kids. I don't teach even adult beginners. I'm not really interested in doing that. Not that that isn't a worthwhile thing, and I encourage everybody to pick up the guitar. But specifically, what I aim to do is work with guys around my age, or gals, or people, I should say, people around my age
Sure.
that have had life happen to them. You get married or you have a kid on purpose or by accident. You get a mortgage, you get a job, you work on building your career. You let go a lot of the loves that you had in your youth, even up into your mid-20s. And then something happens around 40, at least for guys. I think women are probably the same, like, people are people. And something happens 50. Where right, maybe a little older, right? But something happens where we kind of go, there's more to life than clocking in for my 9 to 5 and waiting for Saturday and going to play pool with my buddies or bowling or whatever it happens to be. And for a lot of us, it's music. And for a lot of guys, especially my age, because again, the late 80s and early 90s was a very, very, very fruitful time in the music business. You've got Nirvana, you've got Soundgarden, you've got Metallica, you've got AC/DC, of course, been plunking along for 25 years at that point. But there was a lot of stuff happening. And it seems that a lot of guys my age played guitar, either in a band or even just in their bedroom or whatever. And now that they've got a little bit of money and a little bit more time, they want to get back into it. So my goal is to work with intermediate players. And to your point, my mission statement is to make music fun again. And I find a lot of teachers, looking back at my early years, it's like, you have to do it this way. You have to sit in this position. You have to read this scale and memorize this series of notes and play it exactly as I say with the metronome and da-da-da. There's a time and a place for that. I get it. I've been through that system. I've done that system, and it's not a lot of fun.
Well, you have to learn the rules before you know how to break them, right?
Right. But so what I focus on is like, okay, look, let's just say 40. You're 40, you don't have a ton of time. Maybe you got 15 minutes a day between the kids getting up and going to school and, you leaving to work, or your wife saying, hey, don't forget to take out the garbage, or hey, don't forget you were going to go get the oil change in the car. You've got about 15 minutes to yourself. So how can I what can I give to those students that in that 15 minutes they can get the most out of the time that they have with their instrument as possible, which is, again, a series of either simple exercises that are taken directly out of songs. So it's like, here's the exercise and what you're going to learn, but this is where it comes from. So you can go and play AC/DC's Back in Black, or you can play Come As You Are by Nirvana, right? Because by and large, most music is repetitious just by its very nature, right? We like hearing the things that we like to hear. So there's a lot of crossover. If you learn, there's, blues, for example, there's about 12 different forms. If you learn all those 12 forms, you can basically play any blues with anybody in the North American sort of Western milieu of music. Same goes for rock or for pop or whatever. There's kind of a standard repertoire once you get it under your fingers. The only difference are those little technical things that sometimes either are difficult to hear or difficult to get under your fingers. So again, I focus on that stuff and making it fun. And I have a whole, obviously, as I mentioned, a course and books and my Facebook group, which is a private group just for members of we call it the Guitar Dojo. And we have, it's not even contest because music shouldn't be a competition, but we do monthly collaborations. So either myself or I have a couple people that work with me on the project, and we'll produce a track and we put it out to the general populace and say, jam over it. Put on your solo or put on your chord thing or put a funky thing on it, whatever. And everybody shoots their little video and records their bit. And at the end of the month, we compile it all together and out goes the video. And it's just a fun way to have fun, right? They call it playing music, not working music.
Yeah, right? That makes sense. Yes.
Yeah. And especially now, with COVID and everything and other restrictions and things that are coming, the internet and the ability, like what we're doing right now, is better than it's ever been before to be able to do stuff like that. And especially for people maybe in remote communities or, people with mobility issues or maybe even social anxieties that don't like to get out of the house or whatever, because we have a few of every of those in my group.
Sure.
The online thing is it's much easier, and it gives them a chance to have some expression. So it's a good thing. It's fun.
Yeah. Well, I love that you're doing that. It sounds like a lot of fun for people who want to be doing this. And
totally.
Yeah, I agree about the internet never having been better because, I think if we had had this whole lockdown thing years and years and years ago, we would have been in much worse of a situation.
Oh, totally.
I mean, not that this is a good situation to be in, but certainly having the technology that we have now that's able to keep us connected in a way, even if we're completely different in different places.
Yeah. Countries, time zones.
Yeah.
So on and so forth. Yeah.
It makes the world a smaller place.
Yeah. Yeah. If there is a silver lining to be found, that's the one. Is thank goodness it was 2020, not 1980.
Yes. Yeah. Well,
or heck, even 2002.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. I got my first computer in 86.
Okay.
So
nice. I wasn't far behind you. I think it was maybe 89. Mm-hmm. Because it was 89, and it was an 83, 86. Mm-hmm. So the old DOS processor. And,
is that the XT?
No, I don't think so.
Or 286?
No, it was the 386. So it was like the 286 was the first one. Yeah, it was the next one up.
When the 386 SX was new, I was selling computers.
Nice.
The turbocharged 386.
Yes.
Which those of us back in the day
the turbo button, which actually did the opposite of what it said.
Little did we know.
Yep.
Yeah, never good. But I didn't last very long in that. Although computers has remained a love of my life from that moment that I saw one in 86. So
yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Well, and I mean, it's really transformed everything that we do as humans now. I can't think of a single industry that doesn't have at least some computer automation or computer modeling or computer monitoring or computer connectivity to keep us in touch and to help us with our jobs and so on and so forth. And I mean, if you look at, again, what we're doing right now, podcasting, music creation, sound engineering, all of it it's made everything so much faster and cheaper, which of course there's good and bad to all of that. But
there is. Yeah. But that is a very good segue actually into your composition work.
Totally.
So I'm curious how much you use a computer for your composition work rather than just the recording. Do you do when you're making an entire piece, are you using a lot of computer sampling or are you actually recording different pieces and putting them all together? Yeah,
so when I'm wearing my composition hat for film and TV, I have my brand. When I think about my brand and what it is that I do, if you want to bring this back to like a sound branding idea, and I can give you the words. So the way that I pitch this is evocative rock for media. And that often includes more than just guitar, bass, drums. It's often keys, synths, orchestra, that kind of thing. And when I'm composing, it depends, of course, on the job, but usually it starts with a melody either in my head or something that I've got on the guitar, or possibly a groove that I develop again on the guitar, or maybe even just kind of drumming on my chest or something. Then it's a matter of recording scratch tracks. And usually what I'll do is I'll program just literally using my keyboard and the MIDI roll on Logic, and I'll program a very rudimentary, basic, 3/4, 4/4, 6/8, whatever I happen to be doing, just a basic groove, so that I can record my guitar as a scratch track, so that I kind of know where I'm going, or if it's a piano-led thing or whatever it happens to be. Then I'll actually go in, and I've got a MIDI kit. I don't have it set up in my studio at the moment, but I've got a MIDI kit. Then I'll actually go through and record quote unquote live drums, but I'm actually using that MIDI kit to trigger samples. Then I'll go and record bass, and that I do analog. Guitar I do analog. Piano or synth or strings or whatever will then get layered on top. And again, those are all samples triggered by the MIDI keyboard. So it's kind of funny because it is analog in terms of input, but digital in terms of generation and final outcome. And then again, depending on the usage, will really dictate how much I quantize things. So if the client is really looking for a rock, punk, garage band kind of sound, I usually don't do very much quantization at all, because it has to have kind of a live swinging feel, make it sound like there are actual people in a room playing together. Whereas if I'm doing a placement for like a reality TV thing, which is a bit more sort of keyboard strings, synthy type sounds, that stuff is usually just very quantized, very bang, bang, bang. Not really computerized, but it's almost computerized.
So if we're starting from the beginning of all of this composition, you're contacted by someone who needs a composition. You make the composition, you let them use it. What are the terms usually that they ask for or that you give them? And how do you actually go about selling these pieces of music?
Okay, that's a large multi-part question.
Well, yes. The idea of this is I'm trying to help other musicians understand how this works.
Yeah. So, of course, the short answer is it depends. But by and large, there are sort of two paths that you can go by, to quote Led Zeppelin. One of which is an upfront payment. Actually, there's several more paths than this, but we'll just keep it really simple at this for now. Mm-hmm. One is a pay for use, or a contract for hire. So the client contacts you directly and says, I would like a piece of music that does this, 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 and this. It needs to be this long, and I'm going to pay you this much money. Or I have a budget of X number of dollars. What do you think? And then you pitch them an idea. And then usually those with a work for hire contract, you are signing your life away, for lack of a better word. Yeah. Where you get X amount of dollars up front, maybe $1,000, $1,500, $3,000. Again, every contract's a little bit different because it depends on the size of the client and what they're using it for. So that's a work for hire deal. The other one, and of course you sign those rights, and it's usually worldwide, universal, for until the end of time. And this is it. I've created it for you. It's yours. You do whatever you like with it. Sure. And very often with those, you never see or hear them again unless you're lucky and you happen to be tuned to a radio station or a TV something, and you go, oh, I did that, because they don't tell you about the final use. The other way is what I'll say is probably it has the potential to be more lucrative. And I think what I've done the most of, which is licensing. So often you will, and again, you're either going to be approached directly, or you create music and then you have it available in some sort of repository somewhere, whether it's a music library or an art agency, or even your own website. And clients come and they surf through and they go, ooh, I like that piece of music. I'll have that, please. And then they either pay no fee up front or a very small fee, like a placement fee, usually $200 to $1,000, sometimes more, sometimes less, or zero. But what they do is they put it in their television show or their radio ad or their movie, And every time that show airs, or every time that movie is shown, or every time the ad goes on the radio, you get a percentage. You get a royalty that is paid to you. Now, it doesn't come directly to your bank account. It actually is paid to the Performing Rights Organization. So in the US, they have BMI and ASCAP. And in Canada, we have SOCAN.
Yeah.
And then there are a bunch of others all around the world. So depending on the size of your library and where their clients are located, you could be looking at anywhere from a 3 to 4 month delay to get paid to as high as 2 years, because you have to wait for the foreign country to report to sometimes America. Again, it depends where the production is. So let's just go this way with the longest. Foreign country reports usage to America. America reports bi-yearly. And then they report, and this is to Canada, they report to SOCAN, and then SOCAN pays out quarterly. So it can be a very, very long time. But if you're lucky and you get a placement, and, you know, I was not in the game at this time, but let's take a show like Friends, for example. It's been put into 110 different countries, and it's been in syndication for 20 years now. You could make a piece of music for a show like that, and you'd still be making money today, even though you did the work in 1994.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and it would be substantial because it's huge. And again, that's the goal, is to get your music into a show, at least for me anyways, to get my music into a show that hits syndication, because then it's like, all right, cool, I'm laughing.
Oh, yeah. You can just sit back.
And I mean, it's not, again, depending on the show, it's not necessarily humongous money, because if you've got like a title credit, so like the guys that wrote the theme for Friends, of course, I'll Be There For You, that's a much different sized royalty than the small interstitial music between when Ross opens the door to the cafe and closes the door, you know, so time and so on and so forth. But that's the idea, basically. Those are the two ways that I get paid.
Are you looking for ways to improve your company's or podcast's impact? You'd be surprised how powerful the use of an intentional audio branding strategy can be. Want to know more? I have a free downloadable PDF that gives you my 5 tips for implementing an intentional audio strategy at voiceoversandvocals.com/audio-branding-strategy. That location does ask to put you on a mailing list, just to send you updates on when the new podcasts come out. But if you really don't want to give your email out, I understand. Just contact me directly. My email is all over my website, and I'll make sure you get that PDF without needing to sign up anywhere. If you do sign up, though, you also get access to a resources section called The Studio, where I have videos, white papers, and PDFs, discounts from my guests, and snippets of audio from my guests that no one else gets to hear. So maybe it's worth your while. Totally up to you. And of course, if you're looking for voiceovers, you can get in touch with me about that too. Now, back to the podcast. What do you think about people making a living from writing compositions for advertising and film and that kind of thing, as opposed to going out on the road? I mean, do you consider that selling out, or like what's the difference in this, and how do you think musicians should look at this?
Well, so one of my Berklee profs, one of my favorite things that has stayed with me from my time there, he said, you know, Nick, a bad day playing music is still better than a good day doing just about anything else.
That's a good point.
So to me, I've always looked at it like I'd rather be playing guitar, writing music, talking about guitar, teaching guitar, composing music, working, you know, in a film booth, sound editing, doing, like, you know, something to do with music and sound and the thing that I love. I'd rather be doing that than shoveling snow or, you know, building railway tracks or working in a dentist's office, like whatever. Nothing against any of those professions, because they're all super needed and they're all valuable. But for me, I'd rather play music. And so whether I'm on the road, because I did that in the late 90s and early 2000s, and I was very lucky. I had a lot of fun, met a lot of great people, made a ton of money. So I had that life. But there comes a point where it's like, okay, well, you know, do I want to stay on the road anymore? Because let's face it, less than 1% ever really truly make it as an artist to be their own self, to write their own music and to really play it for the masses as themselves.
And that's a hard life to live.
It is. Being on the road is difficult. It's long. It's long hours. It's lonely. It's a lot of Groundhog Day.
Oh yeah.
And you know, you see the stories all over the place in terms of, you know, people turn into drink or to drugs or to whatever to get you through the night kind of thing. And that's a very seductive lifestyle to a young 16, 17, 18-year-old male. at least of my generation, it was like, yeah, I want to be a rock star. Right. Cool. Let's go. You see videos of Motley Crue and you're like, I want to be those guys. And then you read, of course, their autobiography 30 years later and go, whoa, man, am I glad I'm not one of those guys. But yeah, I always looked at it like I'd rather be making music than having to do something else. And I've got friends that are, in the touring support scene still. And this sort of varies by level. Of course, depends on the tour they're on and how much money they're making. But, you get the low level guys that basically are still touring around doing saloons, taverns, bars, and maybe, 800 to 1,000 seat theaters. And those guys will tell you, my back hurts and this is not a lot of fun and whatever else. And then you get the guys that are, maybe a little higher tier that are playing bigger venues and it's still fun, but they still say the same thing. Like, man, I'm really tired. And then you get the armchair warriors and the gatekeepers of the internet that will say kind of something like where you've said, it's like, oh, well, if you just, write for film, you're just writing for the man. You're just making commercial music just to make money. It's not about the art. And I'm like, to that, I usually say, okay, well, if it's not about art, I'd like to see you write something for this TV show. Here's the brief. Please go do it. And create it in less than 12 hours because they need it tomorrow morning.
Yes. Yeah. Right? That is art.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To do it skillfully, carefully, and, deliver something on time that they're actually asking for, not what you want. Mm-hmm. And I get it. You give up a little of that creative control when you're creating for other people. But it's still me. My rockestra, my evocative rock for media sounds vastly different than John Smith's rock band for media or, Josie Sullivan's piano jazz for cool ambient times. Like you get my idea.
Yeah,
that is my fingerprint on when I hear my stuff on the radio or on a TV show or in a movie. I'm like, that's me. I did that, and that's very rewarding.
Oh, yeah. And along those lines, question for you about these particular film, TV pieces of music. Do you have one that is your favorite that you really, really like that you wish you had written?
Well, I think we all do in some way, form, or another. Like when you look back and go, this is what got me into film scoring, or this is what got me into writing in a band, or whatever it happens to be. And I'm probably going to show my colors because, again, I'm a huge Metallica fan, but I really, 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 really wish I would have written Ecstasy in Gold by Enrico Morricone, or Ennio Morricone, excuse me, the famous Italian Western music composer. It was the theme from The Good, Bad, and the Ugly. And of course, Metallica now owns the rights to that because they use it so often. So
really? Okay.
Yeah, they purchased the rights, I think, in 2013 or 2014 for, I don't know, something stupid, $15-20 million, whatever. But they were tired of paying royalties for it every time they used it for every single one of their shows. And of course, I'm probably misquoting numbers. I don't have inside information on that. But, so they purchased it. It's theirs now and they can use it as they choose. But I love that. And actually, in so much as when I was writing a trailer, I don't know if it's in my bio or not, but I used to co-own a video game studio and I was the head of sound for that company, and I composed a bunch of music for the game. And one of the trailers we did, I very specifically, not so casually, completely ripped off the Ecstasy in Gold because I love it so much. It's just very, very epic sounding. But yeah, that's a piece that I wish. I mean, of course, the easy answer would be like also anything by John Williams, but
well, of course.
But yeah, the Ennio Morricone.
That's the movies of our times, right?
Right. Yeah, totally. Back to the Future is another great one.
Oh, it is.
The main theme. Ba, ba, ba,
yep.
ba. Yeah, fantastic.
It's fantastic. Yeah. Jurassic Park always got me.
Oh, yes.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, another John Williams.
Yes. Yeah.
Back to the Future, of course, Alan Silvestri.
Yeah, these are amazing. And along those lines, out of curiosity, is there a particular song associated with a brand that you like a lot? And I know that we can sort of get into the discussion of re-performed famous songs. So because I know that a lot of brands will pay for a song itself, but not that actual performance.
Correct. Yeah. I don't do a lot of this anymore. What you would call like a replacement recording or a replacement track. When I first started out, I took a couple gigs where I did that and basically recreated. I'm completely blanking now on what it was, but it was a relatively famous song. And they didn't want to pay full mechanical use royalties for the original artist. So instead they paid writer's royalties for the music itself, and then paid me a small mechanical royalty for my recording of the song. And it works out really, really well for shows like that, for a way to sort of, save on budget if it's not something so important that they need the headline artist to actually appear. And then, of course, that brings up, so the easy answer to your question is probably my favorite song for a brand is Cadillac, with using Led Zeppelin Rock and Roll.
Okay.
Which is, hysterical, going back to my comment earlier. Now I'm going to be an internet gatekeeper and go, man, talk about selling out. I'm sorry, like, how are you going to turn down $50 million, right?
Oh, you're not. Of course not.
But of course, that's a very different circumstance, right? Where that band specifically said 30, 40 years ago, like, our music will never be used to sell products and we're never going to do whatever. But times change, people change, right?
And yeah, people change and people get older and people
Absolutely.
don't want to be on the road every 24/7. And
Absolutely.
they want a way to make a living and keep themselves in the way to which they have become accustomed.
But that's probably one of my favorite songs used with a brand. Again, just because I'm a huge Led Zeppelin fan, and I think it was a perfect pairing of target market and the audio that would speak their interest, because it's instantaneously, music has this power to transport the listener back to the time in their life when they first heard it. So if you're selling a sporty Cadillac, which they were, your target audience at that time is probably 50 to 60-year-old men. And how are you going to pique their interest? You're going to play them some Led Zeppelin Rock and Roll, and they're going to feel like a kid and go, instantly join to that brand.
Oh, yeah.
And so it's a perfect placement on so many levels in terms of what it is, what it does, and how it works. So I enjoy it on an auditory level of, it's a great song. I enjoy it on a professional level. I enjoy it with my like producer's hat going, this was really smart. One other one I'll bring up really quick, and it's not even a song, but it's more of a sound.
Sure.
Because I know we talk about your podcast more.
I'm gonna get there. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe I'll wait then, because I have another one that's just a sound that I love.
This has been part 1 of our interview. I hope you'll tune in next week for part 2. Well, that's the end of this episode. Thanks for listening. And if you like what you heard, why not tell a friend about this podcast? It's available in all the usual locations. Until next time.